Hello, this is Guava Moment for the final results of the SpaceChem tournament. We're going to be starting with the losers bracket and Jabor solution. Now, very typical of a Jabor solution, this is a very low symbol solution. My lowest symbol solution for this was 100 symbols. He managed to do it in 52. But let's see what he's doing. We're trying to make polyethylene from all of these random inputs. So we'll start off by, if it's an ethylene, extract these two HCH chains. Red will bond them together. Blue grabs hydrogen waste that will be left over, fuses that into a ball. Okay, so for the ethane, that one makes sense. Let's just do that again. Now we've got acetylene. Nothing gets grabbed here. So what does blue do? Garbage! I just not even use acetylene, fuse that all into a ball of garbage. Next input's acetylene as well. And then for the methane input, extract the one HCH, red will eventually go back and grab it while blue comes and fuses all of the hydrogen waste back into this ball. Eventually red will detect the hydrogen up here so that red knows the whole thing's done, and it will output. The only hitch in this plan is that the garbage ball is very rapidly growing in size. It's about half the way to the maximum point. He's only outputted one polyethylene. So eventually red's going to go through once it outputs, it'll go through the flip-flop. Just speed this up a bit. Move a garbage ball down, and as it keeps building the thing, it'll start building garbage balls down. Just bonding them down, and he'll output by the time this gets all the way to the bottom. So this was Jabor's solution, 2,354 cycles. So how can Pseudodude improve on that? Well, remember back when we did the challenge PVA n equals 4, and it turns out that most of the fast solutions built a giant molecule in halves, built the first half, then the second half, and then stitched them together. That way one molecule didn't have to, or one wallow didn't have to go all the way down to bond to the bottom and then all the way back up. We could do that to speed it up. Also, using the acetylene obviously will speed things up. So let's see what Pseudodude does. First of all, just not even unbond that ethane, just use the whole thing, just slam a whole bunch on, drop the hydrogen, fuse those into a ball. Okay, so build half the molecule, and just go through it again. So that was the first two inputs which were ethanes. The acetylene, one carbon gets fused in, and it rebonds to create an actual bond. So this solution uses the acetylene. Gets rid of that triple bond just by fusing one carbon away. And then for methane, kind of similar to the ethane, just drop one hydrogen, bond it on, get all the garbage, fuse that into a ball. So at this point we got half our molecules done, a series of flip-flops to bond them together, and output. Now this solution will have the same problem with the garbage ball. Building one polyethylene molecule in this will on average create 20 atoms worth of waste, or 20 atomic units. So by the time you're halfway done, the garbage ball will be too big and will have to be moved. That's what all these flip-flops are for. Eventually this is going to get to the point where blue goes through all of the flip-flops, moves the garbage ball over one before it reaches the maximum, and the solution can continue. So you can look at the cycles. I think you can tell who's already won this. So, congratulations, Pseudodude. I believe I said you can win any form upgrade of your choice. And Jabor, you get to look forward to a very special avatar soon enough. There is one thing I wanted to say about Pseudodude's submission. He does have a bunch of error checking in case he does things like build a 5-long polyethylene chain instead of a 4-long half. There is one thing I did notice that does break. If I were to say, change it so that he gets a whole lot more ethane than he normally would, in that case, it's the same solution. It works for a while. However, once he gets to a certain point, it does crash. So there is a certain combination that will cause Pseudodude's submission to crash. It just never actually occurs with the distribution being 1/3 each. With too much ethane, interesting things like that can happen that does crash it. So It's interesting to note that Pseudodude's submission will not work forever for a completely random set of inputs. Before we move on to deadly microwaves, I'm going to start with Catalyst 2 by Zach1XSW2TickTick. This, I said, was the challenge that it takes the longest to plan out how to do this challenge, even before you place a single symbol down. Just figuring out how to beat this is quite a challenge. The first idea I would get, looking at the other Catalyst challenges, would be to fuse something into this nitrogen here, fuse the silicon into that, and then split it all out. Hopefully you end up with a nitrogen and this nitrogen ring. To figure out what that catalyst will be, we'll have to work backwards. So let's try to do that. So here's our nitrogen. We'll pretend that's the nitrogen from the big nitrogen ring that we're trying to output. It has 2 bonds up to the next nitrogen, 2 bonds down. So every time we unsplit this, it has to have at least 4 bonds. So if we had aluminum or silicon, both of these will split down to nitrogen. What we need to do is try to figure out where we're going with this. So every time we unsplit, the atom has to have at least 4 bonds. The next thing we do, like in reverse, would be to subtract the silicon out and then see if that atom would have to have at least 5 bonds. It'll look more sense in motion. I'll try to explain this here a little bit better. We're just trying to do this all in reverse. So the first thing we do is fuse a catalyst in, then silicon, then split down. So now we need to unsplit, unfuse silicon, find out what our catalyst is. So we can't subtract 14 from either of these. So we'll have to unsplit both of these again. So magnesium, iron, cobalt, nickel, all of those will split down to nitrogen eventually. And all of these can have at least 4 bonds, so this all could work. If we subtract 14, the silicon from these, we'll end up with sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon. None of these have 5 bonds. We would need these to have 5 bonds for the solution to work, so we'll have to unsplit all of these again. We'll end up with all of these. We can toss out indium, xenon, cesium, and barium. They don't have enough bonds to form the nitrogen ring. From elements 50 to 53, subtract 14 from those, krypton, rubidium, strontium, yttrium. None of those have 4 bonds, so we'll need to take these and unsplit it again from 50 to 53. That gets us all these. Einstein through Lawrencium, no good. Those have 3 bonds. So if we subtract 14 from these 3, we'll end up with thorium. No good, has 4 bonds. Protactinium or uranium. Both of those will work. To find out what our actual catalyst is, we'll actually have to subtract 7 from these to see the original, subtract 7, the original nitrogen, see what our original catalyst is. So that would be polonium or astatine. We're going to throw at astatine because when you look at the solution, it's going to be a lot easier to make polonium. We're making our catalyst out of the nitrogen rings and silicon. All of those are divisible by 7, and 84 is divisible by 7. So if that didn't make any sense, let's try to explain this, let's try to see this a little bit better. If we take if we do that, what we said before, we take our nitrogen, fuse a polonium, fuse a silicon, we end up with dubnium. If we split all of that down, we'll end up with the nitrogen, and it'll have the number of bonds preserved at each step along the way. And this is what falls out. Note that we need silicon to fall out of this, so we can remake our polonium and output the silicon that we needed. I don't see silicon here. We could split the aluminum into nitrogen and carbon and then fuse those nitrogens together to make silicon. Everything else becomes polonium. That's a lot of words for something you probably didn't understand, so let's try to see this in motion. So this is my terrible, terrible solution for this. So we're going to start off by making polonium. If you didn't follow along, you'll just have to trust me on that. We have to fuse a bunch of things in. We need at least 2 inputs to have enough atomic weight to make polonium. So fuse it in. There we go. Polonium. And then, like the other catalyst challenges, fuse that into a nitrogen, makes protactinium, preserving the 5 bonds. We flip this guy around, fuse silicon in, makes dubnium, preserving these 4 bonds, and then we know we can just split dubnium down and it'll eventually become nitrogen without breaking any of these bonds. We have to do a whole huge song and dance with all of these daughter atoms though, fusing some of those together. We have to get the aluminum, we have to split that to get a nitrogen out. And that's what really makes this challenge hard, trying to figure out what to do with all these garbage atoms and how to dance around, make sure everything is in the proper place. I found the challenge to be really just cramming everything into the reactor. No single challenge is that difficult, but doing it all in one reactor is very challenging. You have to make your catalyst, which takes up almost this entire half of the reactor, and then you've got this half to try to actually do the challenge. It's quite difficult. But there we go, we've got our silicon. We can output that, we've got our polonium catalyst back, and we can restart the whole thing again. This is a kind of a terrible solution, I will admit, even myself. We can do it a much faster way, although we're going to have to cheat. But just for reference, this was my fastest non-cheaty solution in 1500 cycles. Now we could be like Serbaldrig and we could cheat, and it'll be much, much easier. I kind of brought this upon myself though. In the videos with other catalyst challenges, I mentioned how important it was to know that there's the bonder glitch, or the fusion glitch, where you can input and fuse on the exact same cycle and not have collisions. In that case, what you can do is get beryllium somehow, which is actually quite simple, splitting off a nitrogen. Just drop this garbage, drop this lithium, and then the beryllium fuses into the silicon the same cycle you input everything, which creates argon, 0 bonds, breaking all of these bonds. So we've already got our nitrogen ring done. To get silicon out of argon is actually very simple as well. Split it once. To get 2 fluorines, split fluorine. To get boron, fluorine plus boron is silicon, and we've got our beryllium left over. So this is going to be a whole lot faster. I feel a little bit bad about allowing this cheating. I think it was Zamila who came up with this first of all. But you know what, this is clever enough, and I said it's important to know that there's certain tricks and twists you can use to make things faster, so you know what, I'll allow this. It takes a while to make the first beryllium catalyst, but once he does that, Serbaldrig has a 33 cycle path to create his nitrogen and silicons before it loops again. So every 33 cycles it outputs once. 349 cycles for the challenge. WildM is also not one who is above cheating, so he does the same thing. Get your beryllium, fuse it in and all that. It takes WildM 3 cycles longer to make his beryllium than Serbaldrig did. However, WildM's cycle, his whole path, is 32 cycles long, which means, for the first challenge, WildM beats Serbaldrig by 7 cycles. So it's going to come down to deadly microwaves. Okay, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know really how to explain this. These challenges where you're creating some gigantic complex molecule, the entire time you're building it you have to kind of be space efficient, because you know it's going to look like a spaghetti code mess like this. When you're building it, you know it has to be compact and efficient, and trying to do that quickly can be a huge challenge. Unless, of course, you're WildM and you like to cheat. But we'll get to that in a second. So he starts off by fusing 2 polyethylenes together, swapping carbons around and fusing things together. Gets to this point where a bunch of interesting things are going to happen. So he's got his somewhat formed half of dioxin, he's got a carbon here, and then watch what happens here. Red's going to input, blue's going to bond. This is an application of the input bonding glitch. I've never talked about this, so I think we might want to go and look at a video and see what's going on with this. So the bonding glitch. There's a video on YouTube that explains it, but basically if you input and bond on the exact same cycle, weird things happen, where things kind of merge together. So these 2 silicons merge together and these whole things, it's just a weird glitch. I've never seen anyone actually use this until WildM's solution. So now that we know that there's this crazy bonding glitch, let's go back to WildM and see what he's doing. Okay, so we're back at the point here where WildM was doing the glitch. Now the thing that he redid this because the way he's doing it, he actually has garbage left over. He needs to deal with this carbon that's kind of a garbage and these 2 hydrogens here. Why not just BAM! Now he's got his garbage dealt with. That could be an interesting way of if there are any challenges that have a garbage ball that builds up that needs to be moved, maybe you could just kind of remake it and just smash it into the inputs. WildM calls this solution particle smashing, which I think is a lot cooler than, or funnier than glitching. But here we go. Fuse all these to make your chlorines. It breaks this bond, unfortunately, by going through a helium stage. So 2 methylenes going into fusing into hydrogen makes chlorine. Bond that. Fuse all of this methylene into a ball to make your oxygen. Attach oxygen to the top of this, and you've built half your dioxin. It's kind of difficult in this challenge just to have to store this giant molecule into a corner of the map. I mean, it's taken up almost a quarter of the entire reactor. You have to design your solution to be space efficient just to get all this completed, and then even more space efficient so you don't cram into this thing. But in this case, you can just, once you actually have it done, you build another one of these, and it's pretty simple. Last one is the oxygen. It's really hard to explain what exactly is going on in these. You just kind of have to build one of these yourself and it's kind of just a beaut to watch. It's a beautiful thing. Because unless you design this yourself, it's really hard to understand exactly what's going on or exactly why each path is doing what it needs to. It's just one of these challenges where everything you've learned in SpaceChem, all of the tricks and tips you've learned along the way are all being applied in one single challenge. Just something that kind of comes with practice. So WildM eventually builds all of his dioxin. In 2000... Okay, honestly, he did it like 37 cycles faster than this, but I wanted to have the one where it crashes. Because it doesn't really make a difference in the end. But there we go. WildM 2,577 cycles. Serbaldrig's nonsense. Let's see what he can do. Is he going to use a glitch? Well, he's going to use the quantum tunnel to move a hydrogen over, fuse a bunch of stuff in. Sodium into a carbon makes a chlorine. Okay. So leaving 2 hydrogens over here, making another sodium to a chlorine. Now at this point I'm thinking, okay, you're going to have to move one of these chlorines around at some point. I mean, like, on the dioxin, this chlorine could be on the bottom and this could be on the bottom, but then you can't do the same thing on the top. It's just not big enough. So it's going to be kind of a pain to remove, or move all these chlorines around. Still going to have to move one of those chlorines around. Let's see what he does. Well, the benzene ring of carbon seems to be forming nicely. There's his oxygen. And it was at this point I realized what Serbaldrig was doing. I never realized you could do this, but he's found an absolutely brilliant way of remaking the dioxin molecule so that the chlorines can be touching like this. I think that would be a lot easier to build, because then, yeah, building a carbon-chlorine, and then flip-flopping away to do the exceptions would be a lot easier than trying to build a chlorine and then move around to the other side, or just fuse things directly into the chlorine like WildM did. So he's got this. Build the other half of the dioxin. No waste for this solution. No particle smashing. So there we go. There's the other half of this. And it's kind of hard to see. You'll have to do a lot of mental rejiggering to see that this is dioxin. It's just built in a different form that I didn't realize you could. So if you take anything away from this solution, know that you can, even complicated things like this, it might be very helpful to know that you can remake the output any way you want. So here we go. This is Serbaldrig's solution. It ends up with a time of 2018 cycles. That's like 500 cycles faster than WildM's solution. So Serbaldrig wins this. So it all comes down to the Deadly Microwave's low symbol solution. Whoever wins that is the SpaceChem tournament champion. WildM's lowest symbol solution is this. It's practically exactly the same as his high-speed solution, and it gets down to 142 symbols. It's, I think, 3,000 cycles or something. Now, if you were paying attention to Serbaldrig's challenge, this was Serbaldrig's fast cycle solution, and it is lower symbols than WildM's lowest symbol solution. In fact, Serbaldrig even improved on this. It looks like this. It's, again, pretty much exactly the same thing. Gets down to 107 symbols. What does that mean? That means that I am officially crowning Serbaldrig as the SpaceChem Something Awful Tournament champion. Congratulations to Serbaldrig. But don't feel so bad about WildM. He still wins a prize as well. I'll need the two of you contacting me and telling me which Steam games you'd like. Let's just run this to completion. Oh, but I'd be amiss if I didn't show this. This was my first solution to deadly microwaves. Back when I wasn't entirely sure that this challenge was possible. It's much worse than either of Serbaldrig's or WildM's challenges, but I'm still proud of it because, goddammit, it was mine. That's what I really like about SpaceChem. It's one of the most intellectually satisfying games I've ever played, and I hope that by viewing these videos or participating in the tournament or whatnot, you also understand. Because when you're doing these challenges and you try to find a way to work the challenge, figure out the puzzle and how to do it, and you get to a point like right here, where I was doing this, I made all of this using just red. Blue was sitting at the sink the entire time red made this. So once I got to this point and I realized that, wow, red can make the whole half dioxin minus the chlorines by itself, maybe this challenge is possible. And then I sit and stare at it for a while until you figure out, oh, maybe I can do this, I can try this. And then in that one instant where you realize you can solve the puzzle, you have an idea. That one instant where just everything comes to you and everything makes sense. You grok it, if you've ever heard that word before. It's one of the most intellectually satisfying things I've ever experienced, and SpaceChem really brings that out. Oh, and you know what I call those instances where you're trying to figure out a puzzle and then you get the, in one instant you get that solution in your head? I call those guava moments. Thanks for watching. Thanks for participating. I guess I'll finally show this off. It, very, very slow. Very, very terrible. But it's mine and I'm proud of it. So, thanks for watching, everyone.